Up until this point in the Masechta, we had been discussing all the different halachot of Rosh Chodesh, uh, witnesses and who could be a witness, when they're allowed to go, Tchum Shabbos, and all kinds of different things. From this point in the Masechta, really to the end of the Masechta turns to a discussion strictly about Rosh Hashanah. The first discussion that the Mishnah has is the halachot of shofar, which is obviously the main mitzvah of Rosh Hashanah. So we turn to Perek Gimel, Mishnah Bet. So Perek Gimel, Mishnah Bet says the following: Kol hashofot k'sheiran chutz mishal para. As you see in the picture, all shofars or all horns can be used for a shofar except for a para, except for the one displayed in the picture. Why? Mipnei shehu keren. Because the Torah calls it a keren, a horn, not a shofar. Amar Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi argues on the Tanna Kama, and he says, "V'halo kol hashofarot nikru keren shneimar v'mshoch v'keren hayova." Rabbi Yossi says, "What do you mean?" He says, "We see in the story of Yehoshua when they blew the shofar as they were dancing around the walls of Yericho. That we know they used a shofar, yet the Mishnah uses the expression the keren. So we see a shofar is also called a keren. So the Tanna Kama will respond that true, a shofar is also called a keren, but not everything that's a keren is a shofar, and that of a para is a keren and is not a shofar. There's another reason that is brought down why we can't use a para. A para is similar to the egel and reminds us of the chet ha'egel, the sin of the golden calf. And we have a principle as displayed over here, ein kateger nase saneger, that the prosecutor, the defendant the prosecutor can't become the defendant, meaning that the vehicle of sin can't now be used to help us connect to Hashem and have our tefillah reach Shemayim. And we find this in two instances. One, as it says here, the cow reminds us of the Chet HaEgel, therefore we will not use a shofar on Rosh Hashanah. We want Hashem to write us B'Sefer HaChayim, in the book of life. We will not use a shofar from a cow. The second instance is that the Gemara in Yuma tells us that when the Kohen Gadol went into the Kodesh HaKodeshim on Yom Kippurim, he would change out of his clothes that had gold on it and would only wear linen clothes. Again, gold was a reminder of the Chet HaEgel, and therefore the Kohen Gadol would not enter the Kodesh HaKodeshim wearing his golden clothes, because En Kateger Nase Sanega. So for that reason, the Tanna Kama maintained that besides the idea of the keren, also that a para would not be appropriate to use the horn of a para for a shofar, because it is too closely reminds us of the Chet HaEgel. Going on to Mishnah Gimel. Mishnah Gimel continues and begins to describe what was the process of blowing shofar on Rosh Hashanah in the Beit HaMikdash. So the Mishnah tells us, shofar shel Rosh Hashanah shel Yael. The shofar on Rosh Hashanah was a shofar of a wild goat, as we see here in the picture of a wild goat. And upiv mitzupeh zahav. And the Mishnah tells us that the mouthpiece of the shofar used in the Beis Hamikdash was covered with gold. Not the actual area where you would blow into, because that would distort the sound, but the basic area of the mouthpiece was covered with silver. Ushtei chatzosrot, as we see in the picture, and the two silver trumpets, known as chatzosrot min hatzdodim, meaning that as we see in the picture, you would have two kohanim stand on either side of the person blowing the shofar, blowing the chatzosrot. And the person in the middle would blow the shofar. The person in the middle represents the most important aspect of the day, most important part of the day. And that's what the Mishnah tells us. Shofar marich, the chatzosros mikatzro. The shofar would be the longer sound, and the chatzosrot would be the mikatzrot, would be the shorter sound. Shemitzvah hayom b'shofar. The reason for that is to emphasize to us, as you see in the picture, that the shofar was the most important part of Rosh Hashanah, not the chatzosrot, which is in distinction to Mishnah Dalet. In Mishnah Dalet, we see that in Mishnah Dalet, we see that on a fast day, as we see the Rambam Hilchos Tanios, fast days. So we discussed throughout this year that when there was no rain in Eretz Yisrael, they would declare a fast day in order for everyone to daven. Now, on a fast day, the rules were a little bit different than on Rosh Hashanah. Now, this is what would happen. Bataniot b'shel zechar kafufim. According to the Mishnah, on a fast day, they would use a ram's horn, which was curved, upia mitzupa kesef, and the mouthpiece was covered with silver. Ushtei chatzos rows ba'emsa. But here you had the two chatzos rows in the middle, shofar mekatzer, v'chatzos rows ma'arichot. The shofar would be the shorter sound, and the chatzos row would be the longer sound. So here you had four people blowing, two chatzos row, which were in the middle. Again, the middle is always the most important part of the day. It's the mitzvah of the day. And on a fast day, it was a mitzvah to blow chatzos rows. Of course, the Torah tells us, and you can see a little bit here in the Rambam, the mitzvah asem in Torah lizok ulahariya v'chatzos row. That on a fast day, when there's trouble, when there's a need to declare a fast day, there's no rain, there's a drought, we're supposed to call out to Hashem and to blow the chatzos row. So always, again, the middle is the essential part of the day. So therefore, the shofar mekatzer, the shofar was on the sides, two people blew shofar on the sides, and two chatzos row in the middle, but the chatzos row was the longer sound. Mitzvah hayom, the chatzos row. Now, one other idea of this Mishnah is that it says on a fast that we blow the zecharim kafufim. We blow the bent shofar. Bent represents submitting oneself to Hashem. We bow down. We're not straight. We humble ourselves because we want Hashem to answer our tefillot in a time of great need. Last Mishnah for today is Mishnah Hay. So now we described that there were two times that the shofar was blown in the Beit HaMikdash, on Rosh Hashanah and on a fast day. Mishnah Hay tells us yet a third time where the shofar was blown in the Beit HaMikdash. When was that? That was during a Yovel year. Every 50 years, when there would be Yovel, they would blow shofar in the Beit HaMikdash. However, what was different about the shofar in the Beit HaMikdash was that the shofar was blown on Yovel, not only on Rosh Hashanah, but on Yom Kippur. And that was only during a Yovel. Now, if you notice the Machzor, the Mishnah is also going to tell us that they used to say Malchiot, Zichronot, and Shofarot on Rosh Hashanah, on Yom Kippur of Yovel as well. So says the Mishnah, Shover Yovel Rosh Hashanah, that Yovel is equal to Rosh Hashanah, Latikiya, for the blowing of the shofar, as we see here, the Labarachot and the Machzor, meaning they would have to bring out the Rosh Hashanah Machzor, say the Psukim of Malchiot, Zichronot, and Shofarot on Yom Kippur as well. So that year it would be done both on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rosh Hashanah Tokim B'Shel Zecharim. Rabbi Yehuda says that on Rosh Hashanah of that year, they would blow the shofar of the male. The curved ram's horn that we discussed in the last Mishnah. And on Yovel, it would be the straighter wild goat's horn. And the halacha is neither like either one. Rather, the curved ram shofar is preferable both for Rosh Hashanah and for Yovel. So actually, this shofar, which is in this picture, was really what was the halacha that was followed. Even though the Tanakhama and Rabbi Yehuda suggest a split between Yovel and Rosh Hashanah of the Yovel year. Okay, this concludes our discussion of Mishnah Bet, Gimel, Daled, and Hey in the third parak.